Welcome to the All Access Podcast from the experts at Tebis. Each episode, we'll talk about technology topics, trends, or solutions that manufacturers need to know in today's rapidly evolving times. Sit back, enjoy the discussion, and let us know what you think.
Hello, All Access family. This is the All Access Podcast. I am your host, Michael Thiessen. And today we've got something very special. What am I talking about? I'm talking about a little bit of a celebratory podcast, not about the podcast, but about a company that has brought technology to our shores pretty much about 30 years ago and has somewhat changed the way how we're doing manufacturing over here in the U.S. And that's why we have invited two individuals that have been on the podcast previously. And so we'll talk to them a little bit about 30 years ago of what that was like, what the manufacturing sector was like, how it differs from today, and what's special about this particular solution. Now, the company that we're talking about is Tebis. Tebis has been around for over 40 years. But over here on the U.S. shores, they have been here for 30 years. And the two individuals who we're talking about, one of them is the founder of this subsidiary over here in the U.S., and the other one is the current president. So who am I talking to? We're talking to Gerardo Mueller and John Kowalczyk. Welcome to both of you to the podcast.
Thank you, Michael. Pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you very much, Michael. I'm also happy to be here and excited to be part of this discussion on such an important milestone for Tebis America.
It sure is. It sure is. I mean, 30 years is something that not many companies can claim that they have been active. Now, Gerardo, you were the person here on our shores in the Detroit area that kind of made your home at one point back in 1996. Bring us back to what it was like here in Detroit, and then bringing the software over that essentially nobody really knew.
It's an amazing story because back then in 1996, believe it or not, Detroit was the center of the automotive industry, no matter where in the world you would look at it. And obviously, a lot of countries had its own automotive manufacturers. They had their own ecosystems of model makers, mold makers, tooling or die makers. And in Germany, we were quite established. We were able to introduce Tebis to large OEMs, and we were able to build up a significant customer base here in Germany that was expanding internationally. And some of these companies asked us, if we move to North America, if we move to Michigan, would Tebis be able to support us? And this was interesting for us. So we launched an exploratory trip to North America. We visited a few customers, a few companies producing molds or producing dies. Yeah, this was in 1994. We actually managed to gain some customers willing to test the software. And yeah, while testing, we decided, yes, we will move to North America, and we decided to open up a subsidiary in Troy, Michigan. This is the very beginning of Tebis in North America. By the way, these companies that started early with Tebis, some of them are still existing today, and they are very, very important customers to us.
I can imagine that probably back then, it was not easy to get started. Just like it is today, you had companies that were potentially established to some extent. They had an idea, they had a machine. They may have even had some type of a way of a software that they were using. And now there is this German fellow that's coming in from Germany that's trying to show us over here that their system is a lot better. How did you go about that, and what was special about it that these companies were saying, you know what, I got to listen up to this guy that comes into my office that is trying to show me some new technology?
Yeah, this was interesting because one big advantage for us was Tebis was running on a PC. on a DOS PC, while many of our competitors' products were running on larger either mainframe or mid-size large computers. So this was an early opener for Tebis in Europe. By the time we arrived in North America, workstations running on Unix, or many of you know Silicon Graphics, SGIs, these were the main hardware platforms to run on, and Tebis had to adapt its software to also run on SGIs, while our competitors had adopted their software to run from mainframes also on these type of new, very, very fast portable computers, I call them. So here we were almost alike, but another important topic we introduced in North America was the so-called shop floor programming, or we called it WOP, Workshop Oriented Programming. And the idea behind was that the best programmer is the machine tool operator, because while programming, he can listen to what is happening at his machine. And he sees things that at that time it was not possible to see on the screen. Imagine there was no Toolpath simulation, there was no machine tool simulation. We were programming just using cutter geometry, ball cutter, flat cutters, but no holders, no spindle head simulation. So you had to see what happens at the machine in order to understand what goes on. And Tebis was a pioneer in introducing shop floor programming.
If I may add something there, yes, you're absolutely right. Tebis, in my opinion, was well ahead of its time during that time frame. And I experienced exactly what you're talking about. Owners of companies in the early days, their thought process was, because it was new. The CAD/CAM industry was, very new, evolving, and the thinking was we must have these the students from school come in because it's computer oriented. But it was so much different, because as a machinist at that time in the early 90s myself, I recognized this very early on, and you're spot on where you're saying, yes, operator knew the machine. The operator needed to influence the toolpath on the machine. It took a while for many manufacturers to realize this, but once they did, it was more or less a game changer at that time.
Mm-hmm. When you were a machinist back then, and you had Tebis come in, obviously, into the shop that you were at, what was kind of stand out that you saw immediately? I mean, was it the calculation times? Was it the roughing capability? What was it that stood out where you said, wait a minute, I need to really pay attention to this product?
For me personally, actually, Michael, at that time, believe it or not, I was not using Tebis. But what was interesting was over time, I started hearing a little bit more about Tebis in the late 90s and early 2000s. And I started recognizing how Tebis was focused more way back then, which many people, including myself, didn't really grasp the entire process flow versus a simple toolpath, which most companies were. Let's just get a toolpath that can run efficiently on the machine. And that was the success. Mm-hmm. But looking back, what really stands out to me with Tebis in the early days was how the CAD side heavily supported the CAM side, which was overlooked many times.
Sorry, I want to add one thing here, John, is I think what is also remarkable about our software product back then is that while machine operators adopted the task of creating toolpaths, creating programs, one important feature back then was to produce so-called gouge-free programs. And remember back then, CAD files were in no way as clean as they were today. And there were a lot of files with either missing surfaces, missing because the translator, the interface used to bring in these CAD files were not working correctly, or the files simply just missed some tiny surfaces, and this would produce huge problems on many other CAM softwares, while Tebis was able to create toolpaths that would run over surface models, even containing small gaps, which would basically avoid, Tebis would avoid allowing the tool to fall into this gap. So we produced really reliable programs versus others had issues as soon as they encountered any small gap.
Yeah. Let me go back now again to the past with you, Gerardo. You had mentioned that some of these clients or prospects that at the time in 1996 that you advocated to bring Tebis to them, it was not only just mold shops, because I think one of the early adopters was a die shop, another one was a mold shop, another one turned out to be an aerospace type of shop that focused heavily on aerospace and molds. Three different industries really that you early on pioneered into it. It must have not been easy from a way of training and getting the thought process across, because of course in German it's a lot easier to do this, but now bringing it over here, that entire thought process, was that difficult or was that fairly easy to deal with? Or take us through that.
Yeah, it was difficult because obviously when we moved to the US, we brought our training materials from Germany. We just translated those scripts and we used the same example files used for training in Germany. But the mindset was so different because in Germany, usually we had operators that went through a vocational training. So most of these people knew exactly about machining, about manufacturing, while in the US we encountered a more diverse audience. Sometimes my customers said, well, look, my best operator, he used to run a car wash station, and you need to train him on how to use this software. And so this was very different, and almost no customer accepted a so-called classroom training. Most of our customers in the US demanded back then a on-site training, very often using their files or using their products, their problems. So yes, we had to adapt significantly. And of course, every on-site training class was highly tailored to the specific requirements of each customer. So yeah, this was difficult.
What about from a technology standpoint, bringing this technology over to the U.S.? Were there differences, the way how Europe was dealing with technology at the time and the way how U.S. was dealing with it?
To some extent, but I would say we encountered in the US much more companies running 3-axis machines, and 5-axis technology was being looked at, but with reserved contemplations here. Mm-hmm. So 5-axis was not so important at that time, but 3+2 axis became predominant. And I would say many of the customers we approached had invested in these new large machine tools, portable machines with at least 3+2 axis capabilities. And this was a no-brainer in our view.
John, to bring you into this conversation too, Gerardo talked earlier about this change, or this working change of these work-oriented programming, or the WOP stations that we have seen in person before. But really, there has been multiple changes in the industry, especially here in the U.S., first starting from what Gerardo mentioned earlier, a small CAD room, now to this work-operated. How do companies deal with it? Has it now gone back to more like an offline programming, or what does that look like currently?
Well, what's happened, obviously, over time, things evolve. And I think one of I'll call it a huge breakthrough, and actually a very important piece of this puzzle, the connectivity with the digital twin and how you can simulate, the machine behavior, aspects about the machine. And I'm not just talking, physical properties of the machine. I'm talking the exact movements, reactions. And what this does is it creates for a manufacturer the stability, the confidence, the safety, and much higher efficiency, because this can all be proven out before it hits the shop floor. And the manufacturers that have adapted, many have, and many still continue. This is one piece of the puzzle of connecting the entire workflow together. So I think that is one of the most important pieces of this puzzle.
And I think you're right. This digital twin had a lot to do with the shift of the way how we're programming today, because I think we're going away again, a little bit of a mixture between offline programming in a cam room as well as on the machine, because you have these technologies with these digital twins with more virtuality estimating what's going on the shop floor, as well as you have more automated routines that can really enable the programming and the processing of parts a lot quicker, because in today's world, just like it was probably back then, Gerardo, time was always of the essence. And I think one of the things that Tebis was always strong on is the three big pillars that Tebis always stood for, which was safety, the efficiency, and the accuracy that Tebis was providing. Is that correct?
Right. And I think another important trend is more and more customers demand or try to move into so-called lights off machining. And obviously the concept of having machine tool operators programming at shop floor level, well, this is not really lights off machining. There's still a person, there's still individuals populating the shop floor. And with the venue of these digital twins, the possibility to actually run unattended machine tools over a longer period of time becomes more viable. And I think this is a trend that allows you to decide whether you program at shop floor level for unattended machining or where you program in office environment for unattended machining in the shop floor. So even home office type of programming is thinkable, or at least some companies try to produce remote programs, let's say in a different location or even in a different country, and feed machine tools in a completely other location. So I think this is a trend that is unstoppable.
Going back a little bit, Gerardo, what would you say was really a breakthrough moment where you were saying probably, okay, this is really taking off over here in the United States?
I think one important event was Ford Motor Company. Mm-hmm. I think this company, myself, I tried to sell Tebis software to Ford Tool and Die Shop in Cologne in Germany before actually moving to the US. And despite all our efforts and having VW and BMW and other companies using Tebis, Ford in Germany was reluctant, and they said, yeah, you need to convince the guys in Dearborn, and then we can eventually move ahead. So once I was in the US, luckily we were able to do proof of concept at Ford Die Shop in Dearborn, and they had just invested into a new set of very expensive Droop and Rhine machine tools back then, and the concept of programming at the machine was being tested, and Tebis was part of this year, and we finally actually succeeded, and we convinced everyone that Tebis was a game changer for Ford. Once Ford Dearborn Tool and Die became a customer, doors opened up for us in Cologne, in England, in Turkey, in other locations where Ford was entertaining die manufacturing shops. And I think this was a big game changer. And thereafter, the other OEMs, General Motors, Chrysler, they also adopted Tebis. And I think this was the signal we're here to stay.
So when Tebis, Gerardo, made the decision to come to the U.S. and promote Tebis as a software over to the U.S., they had a vision. They had an idea of, okay, this is the way how it should go. Of course, there's probably a 3, 5, 10-year plan of where is Tebis going to go. And you probably had a personal vision as well of how this new company, Tebis America, is supposed to be positioning itself. Has that vision that you've had or that Tebis had, or both together, has that vision panned out?
Yes and no. I would say yes, in the sense that we were able to actually gain almost every large customer in the Midwest, in the Michigan area, mainly in Ontario, also worldwide. After becoming successful in North America, some of our customers here were working for Japanese OEMs. And these Japanese OEMs quickly spread word, well, there is a system out of Germany you need to look at. And suddenly we had the type of companies like Honda and Nissan and others looking at Tebis software from from Japan visiting us in Germany. So yes, we were able to expand, but we remained very focused on automotive industry mainly, and we were not known in other industries, obviously because the product was back then also tailored to the specific needs of die manufacturing. Mold manufacturing, which involves more complex machining than die manufacturing, was more difficult to tackle going into completely other industries, machining large mechanical components. This is another challenge. But what helped us a lot in the US was that with the financial crisis in 2007, 2008, a lot of companies in the Michigan area suddenly faced the prospects of difficult economical environment because General Motors filed for bankruptcy and so on. So there was a big shift, a big change in the industry back then, and companies owning large machine tools, they started to look into other industries, and many of these companies started to machine jigs, fixtures, components, even tooling for the aerospace industry. And these companies decided, well, we're going to use the same software we used for machining automotive dies or molds. We're going to use these machine tools and the software to run these machines on other components. And I would say the US today is a market that is quite diversified. We have, I would say, almost the same amount of customers machining aerospace components as we have customers machining non-automotive parts, but also, of course, automotive parts.
John, landscape has changed over the 30 years. The entire CAD/CAM world has kind of turned its way upside down, and you're steering this ship over here in the U.S. for Tebis America, and it must not be easy because in the CAD/CAM world over the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen some of these smaller companies, CAD/CAM companies, have been gobbled up by larger conglomerates, and Tebis has not done that. Tebis has stood its ground, has for 30 years here in the U.S. and 40 years for Germany, has become this pillar over here. So what do you think sets Tebis apart between Tebis and some of these larger big companies now that are trying to manipulate customer base and companies over the U.S.?
Very good question, Michael. A tremendous amount has changed over the last 3 decades for sure. Obviously, technology, the complexity in the manufacturing world, automation capabilities, etc. However, a few things have remained very consistent about Tebis. I mean, our commitment to manufacturing itself, number one. We've always been deeply connected to real production environments and the manufacturing challenges that go along with it. Our team is very knowledgeable. Our roots with many of our employees stem from the shop floor in the industry. So what sets us apart, one of many things, is when we go into a customer and we have a discussion, and since we have some deep background in the manufacturing, the customer picks up on this early on and they can relate to us and vice versa, and we can understand their challenges and where they need to go. So it's about having a discussion and understanding the full spectrum instead of just targeting a simple solution and move on. So in that aspect, Tebis has remained extremely strong. We focus obviously on innovation moving forward to enhance, the knowledge that we maintain. And our customers and the partnerships that we have created over the years, they only get stronger because, again, we're here for the long term, for the partnership to help succeed, whatever it takes on the manufacturing side.
I mean, it's clear and it's obvious that if a software company does not provide new technology and innovations, as you said, John, Tebis would not be here in 30 years in the U.S. or 40 years in Germany. And therefore, companies such as Tebis always has to be on the forefront. Manufacturing environment changed so much that nowadays data is something that drives drives every company. And data is something that in today's world, if you don't deal with evaluating data and utilizing the data for your advantage, a company may very quickly not meet its milestones and not meet delivery dates. And we all know what that means, and not repeat business and so forth. Gerardo, John, what is Tebis doing with data and trying to make sure that you have the latest innovations constantly available?
Well, I think, Michael, besides data, we're not only talking about data that we produced in the past and that we may use in future to rely on, let's say, with the help of AI and these type of concepts. I think an important step in Tebis's history is the early partnering with a company developing a MES solution here in Germany. Ultimately, Tebis acquiring this company also some years ago, because binding CAD/CAM and binding the concepts of digital twins, meaning representations of virtual machines, representation of tooling used at these machines, even the utilization of templates that store knowledge on how some parts are being manufactured. If you combine this data with a MES solution that allows you to plan ahead and plan weeks ahead how you are going to populate your shop floor, how are you going to assign jobs and work to different machine tools or to different other locations, be it assembly or be it machining preparation, these type of areas, if you are able to embed this into a compound solution, then I think this is where you start offering value to customers that goes beyond just offering let's say, a particular feature capable of programming a part in a certain way. So I think this is an important step of Tebis. Obviously, with the development of AI, the speed of this development, I would say, plus the requirement or plus the situation that many customers use many different systems in today's environment, this forces us to open up our software and to explore capabilities to link Tebis MES to other solutions as well through an API interface. And I think API is a precondition for us to be able to offer AI-assisted solutions in future.
John, I said early on at the very beginning of the podcast here that this is a celebration. You don't run into a 30-year anniversary every single year. So what's Tebis America doing in order to celebrate that with their clients?
For us, the anniversary is really about recognizing the people, the partnerships, all that helped build Tebis America over the last 3 decades. We're taking time throughout the year to celebrate the company's growth, but we're also want to celebrate our customers, our employees, our partners, and the industry as a whole. These relationships go back decades, which is something we're extremely grateful for. So we're also incorporating some fun tied to our history, and we're including a special called a 30-year themed sales campaign that brings back some throwback pricing concepts. It's a way to give back, show appreciation to customers, and offer for something that they can help build their business moving forward. But beyond the promotions, the anniversary is really a reflection of the trust, long-term relationships that we have built throughout the region.
It's very unique that a company of the size of Tebis they're really saying, you know what, we want to help out where it really hurts. And for a lot of companies, money right now is something that is precious. And this is one way to say, you know what, we see the pain that you're running into. We want to give the ability to get into a system such as Tebis that is really such a game changer in the U.S. manufacturing technology and the manufacturing world. I mean, I've seen the sales package myself, and it is truly an incredible feat for Tebis to say, you know what, I'm going to give up 40% of that revenue in order to give back to the companies or the customers that are willing to engage in that. And that's a lot of money for a lot of companies. And I think it's kudos to you, John, as well as to you, Gerardo, to come up with such a thought process of saying, you know what, we celebrate our customers, we celebrate prospects, and even the companies that are not yet Tebis and the Tebis family, we celebrate them as well for them to entertain that idea. So thanks to to the both of you to get that in. All right, Gerardo, any final thoughts from your side of how these 30 years have gone and what the next 30 years will look like?
Well, obviously, for me, the last 30 years of Tebis America means a lot to me personally because I started at Tebis in 1988. In 1996, I moved to Michigan with my family and helped to establish Tebis America. So looking back, it's amazing how quickly these 30 years passed by. And I'm amazed about what we have accomplished, the type of customers we have gained. This is amazing for me. And many of our very early employees from 1996 and shortly thereafter are still employed today at Tebis America. So I think this is remarkable because in an environment where usually people shift employers easily, our employees remained with Tebis for a long, long time. And this is not only seen in the US, but also Tebis in Germany, or Tebis in other subsidiaries. So the people that work at Tebis, they live Tebis. And the next 30 years, I think our opportunities are even bigger than ever thought because everyone sees and understands that software and computer technology that mimics and reflects the physical environment to produce something or to manufacture something. This is key today and will be key also in future. So Tebis is in a first row position to stay here as a leader in this technology.
John, any final thoughts from your side for the next 30 years of Tebis America?
Yes. Well, Gerardo, you're spot on there. I back up exactly what you mentioned. That's the consistency over the last 30 years, the people, the process, the trust. Absolutely. And I also agree with you on the technology side. It is evolving so rapidly right now, more so than the last 10, 15, 20, 30 years. It's an exciting time. It truly is. I mean, we have now this AI assisted technology coming into the picture, further automation, the digital manufacturing. It's just, I wish, and maybe I do, I had another 30 years in my career because I am so excited about what's coming, more so than where we've already lived. I'm very grateful and proud where I am as well as having the opportunity to be in this manufacturing industry and just, relate to customers and partners and employees along the way. So my point is that the next 30 years is going to be even more exciting than the past 30 years.
Awesome. Right. Well, you heard it here first. John will be in his 90s when he is still going to be at Tebis. So thanks to the both of us, Gerardo and John. I appreciate having you on the podcast and sharing your experiences. And John, to you as well as to Gerardo, thank you for also making Tebis a success in the U.S., for coming out with a great celebration opportunity for a lot of these companies that are saying, you know what, I always wanted to get into Tebis, but never had the chance to do it. Thanks for being at Tebis.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much.
So to all of you guys that are listening in and have enjoyed this episode, 30 years in the CAD/CAM industry in the U.S. as well as 40 years in Germany is not a small task. Tebis is still a company that is privately owned, is not on the stock market, has not been gobbled up by large companies that are just looking to make a buck. Tebis is there truly to enhance your operation. We're just providing you the know-how, the capability with our software. You, as the manufacturers, are really taking this software and the other products that we have really to the highest level. So we at Tebis, we want to thank you for supporting this cause and supporting manufacturing. You're really the rock stars when it comes down to it. But all in all, I want to thank you for listening in, especially to this episode of the All Access Podcast in celebration of Tebis. If you want to have some information about the celebration package that John mentioned, reach out to us at info@tebisusa.com. The only thing that is left to say on this is keep shaping the future. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining this episode of All Access. Please leave a comment or review with your feedback or what you'd like to hear in future episodes. To learn more about manufacturing technology solutions and Tebis's capabilities, visit our website at Tebis. That's TEBIS.com.